as you probably know, this is Brandon with Choice Valuation, and this is our little class on cost data and how best to first get your cost data and fill out your cost approach for your subject, but then also, and what's probably going to take up more of the time, is get into how you can use Spark, I should say, to help you get a site value for your subject property using either site extraction, or the allocation method. Okay, so let's just jump into it. So the first thing I'm going to do, and what I'll start off with here is we tried to make Spark kind of as versatile as possible given the different number of workflows appraisers have. Some appraisers like to do the grid and the 1004MC right at the beginning when they first create their report, and then they go do their inspection, and then they come back, and then they just do the cost approach, and they don't want to reload comps into their report or anything. So we've made it so you can do that. So whatever your workflow is, it should be able to work with or Spark should be able to work with that. So if you have any questions on that as I go through this, let me know. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and load in a subject and comps, because I'm going to use those comps for my site extraction method. So I'm going to go ahead and load in comps here. And this is actually the same file I use for pretty much every webinar and every class I do. I'm comfortable with it, so I'm going to keep using the same one. All right, so we're going to load that in, come over here to the grid, and I am going to take this comp 7 actually, and make it my subject by dragging it and dropping it right here to the subject. Okay, so this is my subject. These are my comps. Of course, you don't have to load in your subject that way. You can do it any of the other 2 ways as well. What's important, though, is the easiest way to fill out the cost approach and get site extraction or allocation is to have your subject and comps in your grid. Now, if you've already loaded them into your grid in a previous session of Spark, and now it's like, let's say it's the next day, you went out and inspected, and now you're going to do the cost approach, that's okay. Just bear with me, and I'll show you how you can have your comps and subject in here, but then when you export it, it won't try and reload that same information into your report. So I'll show you how to do that at the end here. Okay, so now I'm just going to click over to cost data. And here I'm going to start out by doing what it says here. Just click here to add in my information. Now you can enter in your subject property information manually. It just means you're just going to fill this stuff out. But what I'm going to do instead is import it from the grid in Spark. And so it just fills in as much as it can. And it knows in this case that this property has a carport, because that's what the listing says, but it doesn't obviously know how big it is or what the quality is. So it highlighted that red to let me know. So the first thing I'm going to do is fill in the quality rating of my subject property. Now I'm going to assume, just since this is a class on cost data, I'm going to assume you haven't used it before. So we're going to get into some details here that many of you may not care about, but there's maybe some of you who haven't used the cost section of Spark before. So I just want to make sure I get into this. The quality rating is really important. So when I hover my mouse over this little eye here for information, it shows me the different quality ratings. And anytime I've ever had an appraiser, and some of you have seen it in our user forum on Facebook, anytime we've had an appraiser who had a problem with the cost data being either really high or really low, it's typically been because of the quality rating. In fact, I think every time it's been because of the quality rating. So I just want to make sure and point this out here. So make sure you're really well aware of this, and also take some time, click here where it says click here for detailed information, and pull up dwelling costs rating. And by the way, all of our cost data is from dwelling cost. So, so you want to come here on this page, and again, to get here, you hover over the I for quality, and you right here where it says click here. And so there's a few things to really keep in mind. One is this, the general rules of thumb. Make sure you read that and be aware of how dwelling costs wants you to add points. They call them points to base quality rating. And a point essentially is 1/10 of a number. So like if you say in your base quality rating is 3, then 3.1, that's 1/10, and so that's 1 point. So that'd be 3.1. So let's say I have really great appliances, plumbing, and electrical. Then I could have, if my base quality rating is 3, then I could have up to 3.2. They're saying 3.2 is the highest you can go, assuming the only thing above and beyond that your property has is actually. Guys, we just had somebody say that they can't hear anything. Can someone just reaffirm to me? Gina already did at the beginning, but can you guys hear me? Can someone just put in the chat bar that they can hear me or they cannot? Okay. All right. I got people saying they can hear me. Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. So you got the rules of thumb here. And so make sure you are aware of these. And then down here, if you scroll down, you can see your base quality level of 1, and you get some image examples of what a 1 is. Here's a 2 and 3, and so on up to 8. Now, if you're doing something ultra luxury, then it specifically says on this page that there is a quality level 10, but dwelling cost just doesn't go that high. So this is as high as they go, quality level 8. And that should cover most every property in the country. You can see images here, but there are going to be some that are ultra luxury that you just can't use a national cost service like buildingcost.net or Craftsman or Marshall and Swift or dwelling cost for that. So anyways, just be aware of that. Quality level 8 is as high as it goes. And then you can just add points onto that. So, okay, all right, I think I beat that up enough. Okay, so here we go. So I got a 3.5 in here. That's what I'm saying my subject property is. And I'm going to say I have a covered patio. So I can, right here, I can say it's 150 square feet. And I'm going to say it's quality standard. And I can also choose if I have a swimming pool, I can put that in. Hopefully, if I had a pool, Spark would have alerted me by making it red because Spark knows when there's a swimming pool. But for patios, just so you're aware, for decks, patios, porches, Spark will never automatically fill that in. It's just so inaccurate with what agents say in the MLS that we decided not to fill that in. So you will need to put in the patio information yourself every time for your subject property, but it will alert you with the red boxes for garages, carports, swimming pools, that kind of thing, basements, all that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and fill in my carport. I've already been to the house. I know my carport is, we'll just call it 450 square feet, and the quality rating is 2.5. So your quality ratings are the same, and again, you can hover your mouse over this eye and see them again. So you can see exactly what that means. And the same thing with the patio. I didn't show you this, but if you hover over this eye for quality, it'll show you the quality ratings, and you can click here, and it will show you the breakdown for patios, what each one means kind of in layman's terms, standard, above average, and what exactly that means for each of the different kinds of patios and decks, porches, and swimming pools. Okay. So what else do I need to show you? Okay, so we got this pretty much filled out. So this is a pretty basic tract home, nothing special. So I think I'm pretty much done. The last thing I want to do is fill in my effective age, and I'll show you exactly what Spark's going to do with that. So I'm just going to say my effective age is 14. And you can see when I tabbed out of that field, it automatically put in a 23.3% physical depreciation. And all that's doing is it's just using the basic straight line or age life method where it takes the 14 and divides it by the total lifespan. And in this case, if I hover over this eye, Spark shows me that the total lifespan is set to 60 years. But just like the grid or anything else, if it's in blue, you can click on it to customize it. So I can click on physical depreciation in blue here, and I can change that 60 to whatever number I want to use. And then Spark will just take that number, divide it by that, and give me my physical depreciation. Now, this is an easy, quick method, but if you have a better idea of what you want your physical depreciation to be or what it actually is for your property, then just fill that out yourself. I can type in any number here and just fill that out yourself. You don't have to use this typing in the effective age and letting Spark calculate it. If you have a better method, then feel free to use that. I'm going to go ahead and switch this back to 14. And now you can see it's grayed out here because I haven't gone and grabbed the cost data yet, but I do have my as-is value of site improvements. Like this would be things like your fencing, driveway, other features that aren't included in the cost data here. So I'm just set that at 5,000. 5 to 10,000 is a pretty standard number for most homes. Of course, you just use whatever you think is appropriate. And then there's one other thing I wanted to get into. Well, first let me tell you what other/additional costs is. So this would be where you put in any entrepreneurial incentive, entrepreneurial profit would go here. And again, you can click on these in blue and you can set up defaults. So I can click this and say I want to default it always to a certain percentage and have entrepreneurial incentive always default to 15%, and it will automatically put that in. Or I can set it to a specific dollar amount. And the same thing with my as-is value of site improvements. I like it to always be set at 5,000, and then when I'm doing a slightly higher end home or anything better than just basic average, then I just tweak it on my own. But you can click here and change. You can see I have it set to $5,000, but I can change that to anything I want or a percentage as well. Okay, So that's all. This is all pretty straightforward and basic. Everything's filled out other than I don't have my site value, and that's what we're going to get into. But if you don't want to use Spark for site value, then basically all you got to do is hit Get Cost Data right here in the top right, and then Spark is going to go grab the cost information, and then you're going to see it fill out right here. So now you can see my dwelling's filled out. Here's the price per square foot, and this is all to build it new. And you can see when I hover over this little eyeball here, this eyeball icon, you can see it shows the dwelling, if there's a basement, the attic, patios, pool, the parking, and then the cost to build new. It just adds it all together. So it always shows you the math, and when you hover over these little eyeball things here. Same with depreciation. If you had multiple kinds, it'd add them all up and show you cost. Here's the total depreciated cost. And then down here, the very last one, it shows you the total and how it got to the total. It's pretty straightforward and simple. And also when you hover over this eyeball, there's a comment down here, and that's the comment that'll go into your cost approach in your report. Or if you don't want that comment to go into your report, it will go into your work file. And basically all the comment says is what the local multiplier was. And the way dwelling cost does it is a little different than buildingcost.net or Marshall and Swift. So dwelling cost does it down to the zip code. So there's basically over 4,000 different local multipliers versus or maybe it's 3,000. I don't remember how many zip codes there are, but there's a lot versus, what was I going to say? Oh, like for Marshall and Swift, where they use MSAs or statistical areas, and they drill it down to about 400. So dwelling cost theory is because they drill it down deeper and have more local multipliers that theirs is more accurate. I don't know if that's true or not, but that is what dwelling cost says. So anyways, yeah, that's basically it. Now, there's a couple things I wanted to hit on before we get into the site value part. And again, please feel free to chime in with any questions as I go through this. But essentially, here, let me show you this. I'm going to put in a swimming pool. So I just click this checkbox. I'm going to say it's 450 square feet, and the quality, we'll just call it standard. And then I'm going to go hit Get Cost Data. Okay, so here's what we've got. I've got my pool put in. You can see the total price went up significantly because of the cost of a pool and the depreciation. So the problem with this is when you include things like patios, decks, and swimming pools, a lot of the times these things do not depreciate at the same rate that your home is depreciating. And also some things have different types of obsolescence. So like a pool may have some type of functional obsolescence, or maybe it depreciates at a much faster rate, whatever your theory is on that. So what some appraisers do is they do not include these in here, and they will just include them in their as-is value of site improvements because they don't want to hit the pool by 23% for depreciation like they're hitting the rest of the dwelling. They want to do that separately. And so maybe you say, well, the as-is value of a pool is, we'll just call it 15,000. So I'd do 15 plus 5 and say 20. And then also I might want to add in whatever I think the as-is value of my patio is as well and just put that in there. So what I'd recommend is whichever method you prefer to use, whether you want to include the patios and the swimming pools in the actual cost approach part or just estimate them yourself, the as-is value, make sure that you're consistent in doing it. So if you're going to do it one way for your subject, make sure that if you're going to use the allocation method, which we're about to get into, that you do it consistently for that as well. Otherwise, you're going to get wacky numbers. And you'll see what I mean when I get into the site value part here in a second. So I'm going to go ahead and put my patio back in because I'm going to just leave it like that for now. Okay. Okay, so I'm basically done. I'm just going to hit Get Cost Data one more time. And also, one other thing before I get into site value that I just remembered is if you do this and you say, let's say you already know the site value. Let's say I know the site value is 70 grand. So I'm going to put that in there. It automatically added 70,000 to this, and you can see the math right there. So now I'm saying that it says the house is 204. Now I know there's going to be times where you're like, holy cow, 204, that's way too high. This is something's not right. And so you can feel free to come in here and change anything. And all you got to do is just change whatever number you think is inaccurate. And usually it boils down to either your effective age, which is basically your condition, or your quality right here. So you could change this to 3.0, hit Get Cost Data, and then just watch as the number updates. So it was 205, and now it's 194. So just, you can play with things if you want to as well. And once you get into using this a few times, you'll get the hang of it, and you won't have to kind of play with things so much. You'll get the hang of how the quality ratings work for dwelling costs. Okay, so that pretty much covers the basics of the cost approach for the subject. I knew that took me a while to do because I went through everything, but just to kind of give you an idea, I'm going to remove it and start over just to kind of show you it should be fairly quick and easy. You import it from your grid, you type in your quality, and you choose whatever of these you want to load in. I'm going to load in my patio and use D as standard quality, and then my carport, which I think I said was that, and my effective age. And so I'm pretty much done. I just hit get cost data, and that's all there is to it. And then you can export it and put it in your report. You can do this at the same time as your grid, at the same time as your 1004MC, at a separate time. It doesn't matter at all. But if you did load in your grid, and this is the part I was talking about right at the beginning, so I just want to make sure you're aware of this. If you did load in your grid, but only so you could make it quicker and easier to do your cost approach or site value, then you want to make sure that when you hit export, because you probably don't want your grid to be loaded into your report again, especially if you've already made changes to your grid. So you hit export, and then right here, you just got to check this box. And that box means it says exclude subject comps from grid, cost data only. So that means, just like it says, we're not going to put any of those comps into your grid. You don't have to worry about it. Nothing will go into your grid. No subject information will change other than the cost approach. So just make sure you check that box if you're going to do that. The nice thing about, I think, well, I know all of us here are all mode customers, and so they have that timeline feature. So if you do happen to forget and not check that box, you can use the timeline feature in total to just wind the clock back and go back to how it was, so you don't have to worry about losing your comps. Okay, so now let's get into site value. This part is going to be a little bit more complicated. So to do this, I hit the plus sign again, because essentially, in order to get your site value, you either need to load comps over into the cost data side of Spark so it can perform extraction or allocation, or you need to load in actual vacant land sales. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to hit the plus button, and then right here it says site value, enter property manually, or import properties from Spark Grid. So what I'm going to do is import them from the grid. And before I do that, the first thing Spark will do is it's going to present this window, and it'll show you the 3 ways that Spark can calculate site value, either with vacant land sales, site extraction, or through allocation. And the main difference is vacant land sales is totally different than these two, because vacant land sales uses vacant land sales, whereas these two use the actual sales with improvements, typically your comps that are in your grid. So I'm going to use these two, but if I choose yes, I have vacant land sales, then Spark will just ask you to enter some real basic information about your land sales, and then it will give you like a little an image where it's easy for you to kind of choose your site sales, and it will adjust your vacant land sales to the size of your subject. And I'll show you that all here in a little bit. So I'm going to say no, I don't have vacant land sales, and I do want to perform site extraction, so I'll choose yes to that. Okay, so now I have a list of every comp in my grid, because I told Spark I wanted to import these from my grid. Now I'm not going to use any pendings or actives. I don't recommend doing that for site value. It can lead to wacky results. Just use closed sales. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose these in order of how close in size they are to my subject. Now, typically, size isn't always the main determining factor. Sometimes you might have a lot that's significantly different in size, but it has the same view. And so just choose in order of what is most similar in site size, or even what you think is going to be site value to your subject. So these are all basic tract homes, so for me it's just size, so I'm just going to pick them in order of how close they are in size to my subject. And by the way, Spark does show you your subject site size right there at the top. So I'm going to choose that, and whoops, not that one. And then last, I'm going to pick this one, which is a bit bigger than everything else. Okay, and then I'm going to import. And so what that does is it put these in order of how close in size they are to my subject. So comp 1 is really similar, 7776 versus 7759, and then so on down the line here as I go through the rest of my comps. Okay, so now you can see, well, hopefully you can see here that a lot of information regarding my comps has already been filled in. So really what we try to do is make something that usually was a really time-consuming process to perform site extraction on your comps, make it really quick and easy, but also not lose accuracy. So here you can see that I have covered patio checked for every one of my properties. And that's because I told Spark, I'm in Phoenix, and in Phoenix, covered patios are predominant. Like, they're the thing. Most houses don't sell without a covered patio. That's just what houses have here. So I told Spark that automatically assume there's a covered patio and automatically assume it's 100 square feet and automatically assume it's standard quality. And that's, again, just like in the grid, over on the left, the thing in blue. So I can click here, and you can see it says always include covered patio. I chose yes. What size do I want it to be, and what quality? Now, it tells you right here, these settings do not apply to your subject. I expect you guys to know the size of your subject's patio and porch and deck and attic and all that stuff. So you don't need settings for your subject, but these are for your comps for when you're using site extraction. So I have Spark set up to automatically load in a covered patio of 100 square feet, standard quality D. And it did that across the board. Now for the other features like swimming pool and garage and carport, Spark knows from the grid whether the property has it. So it knows, for example, property 1 right here, it has a swimming pool. That's why this checkbox is right here. You can see comps 2 and 3 don't have that. And so Spark knew there was a swimming pool, but it doesn't know how big it is or what the quality is. And so again, that's just a setting over here. So you can click on swimming pool. It says always include a pool. I would expect that every appraiser would probably say no here. You probably don't automatically want to include a pool on every property, so don't change that to yes. But then if there is a pool, it will use these features. So if there is a pool, it's going to be 450 square feet and it's going to be quality D. And you can just make that whatever you want it to be, whatever is normal in your area for the type of properties you're typically appraising. Obviously, if you do stuff all over the board, then you may not want to use these default settings. Or let's say you almost always do, kind of standard lower end or average quality tract home stuff, and this is a standard quality size, but maybe you're doing a report where you got a lot of comps and it's also a really high-end property. You can just change this right here to, let's say, 800 square feet, which is what I think is a giant pool, and we'll call it good. And then when I hit go back, you can see it changed my pool to 800 square feet and quality level B, which is good. Now I don't want that, so I'm going to put it back. But that's basically how it works. And it's the same way for garage and patio. Now garage for garage and carport, they're slightly different because with a garage, for example, Spark knows how many garage bays you have. So instead, what we want you to tell us is how big do you want the average bay to be for your comp? So you can see this is a 2-car garage. I said make one bay 225 square feet. So that means Spark just takes the 225. Here, let me show you. I'm going to click on garage 1 here. And you can see I say when the garage type is unknown, assume it's attached. You don't have to use that though. You can do whatever you want or leave it just empty and fill it out yourself. But I say if it's unknown, say it's attached. Although in most MLSs, Spark will know whether your garage is attached or detached. Default size per bay from grid. So when you're importing your information from the grid, rather than typing it all in manually, like that's what I did, is I imported it from the grid side. Spark will know how many bays the garage is. Then you just say how much do you want the average bay to be. And so if I had this at 300, then that means a 2-car garage would be 600 square feet by default. And then here is when I'm typing manually, it'll say 450. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a second here. And then default quality, just like with the swimming pool, you set a default quality for your garage and it will load that in. So now across the board here, I see I have an attached garage. It's 2-car, quality 3. Same with comp 2. Comp 3 has a carport, 450, and I have carport set to be a default quality of 2.5. And across the board, it does the same thing for every comp. Now, what was I about to show you? Oh yeah, so let's say, let me just show you. This setting right here, what exactly does this mean? Default garage size when typing manually. Like what's the difference between this and this? So this is when you're importing it from the grid. Spark knows how many bays it is, so it multiplies this by the number of bays. But if you're not importing from the grid and you're just typing manually, let me show you what that looks like. So right here, I set this property to have no garage. Now, if I change it manually to say it has a detached garage, it automatically loads in 450 and 3.0. And that's because of this setting right here. So all I had to do was say it's a detached garage and Spark automatically loads in 450 square feet, 3.0, or whatever your settings are, whatever you want them to be. I'm going to go ahead and change that back to what it should be. And we're good. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to touch on regarding this. I think that's probably it. Same thing with basements. Basements will load automatically as much as it can anyways based on your MLS. Some MLSs have good basement data, some don't. So if you're in an area with basements, you may have to tweak this depending on what we're getting from your grid. But yeah, that's essentially the way it works. So I'm just going to show you this. Well, here, let's go ahead and finish up. Sorry, I know I'm bouncing around all over the place. Okay, so essentially all I've done, even though I've talked for 10 minutes, all I've done is I loaded the comps in. I haven't typed anything. This is all just what Spark loaded in automatically. So now all I'm going to do, essentially all you should have to do is verify the information, make sure it looks okay, and you need quality and condition. Condition being either your effective age or your physical depreciation. So we added these buttons over here, which I call it the push button or the copy button, but basically it's just like using the F2 key in Total. It pushes this value across to everything over to the right. So I'm going to push my quality of my subject over to all my comps, so just to save me some time in typing. Now, of course, not all your comps are going to be the same quality, but that's okay. As we go through this, I can tweak it. So I just push that across, and I like to do that because in general, my comps are going to be either the same or very similar in quality, at least most of the time, to my subject property. So I push that across, and I'm just going to go ahead and push across my effective age. So you can see I pushed that, so now everything shows an effective age of 14. And now all I need to do basically is just go through and verify the condition and the quality. And so I'm just going to say, okay, so I know comp 1, because I know this property, is a little bit inferior condition, so I'm going to call that effective age of 20. Comp 2 looks good to me. Let's say comp 3 is in even a little bit worse shape, so we'll call that an effective age of 26, really no updating at all. Oh, and by the way, something you can do if you're like, shoot, I don't remember this property. How old was this? What condition is it in, that kind of thing. You can hover your mouse over right below my mouse right now. There's that eye and it says from grid. I can hover my mouse over that and it will show me as much information that's pertinent from this grid in Spark to show you here. So I can see the age of this property is 38. Okay, so I'm going to use the effective age of 26. And then as I scroll over, so I know comps 4 and 5 actually are in really good shape, so I'm going to call that effective age 6 for those two. They're both similarly really well updated. And I also happen to know that this one has some good upgrades. Not great, just a little bit better. So I'm going to call this like a 3.8. And yeah, I think I'm good. So I'm happy with this. So now all I need to do is hit get cost data. And essentially what Spark is going to do is it's going to go grab the cost data for every one of these properties. Okay, so that's done. So essentially now, let me scroll over. So here's my subject and here's comp 1. So now you can see at the bottom for the subject is your value. I'm sorry, not your value. The total cost, including everything, site value, depreciation, everything. Now I don't have a site value filled in here yet, so it's not including that. It's just the 134, which doesn't include my site value. But down here for my comps, instead of showing you the cost, we're showing you the site value. So what it does, and again, you can hover your mouse over this little eyeball icon, and you can see here, it takes the sale price of the property, subtracts out the depreciated cost, and any as-is value of site improvements, entrepreneurial incentive, or however you want to handle that, and it gets you the site value. So this is the site value using extraction for this property. And then the same with comp 2, comp 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so now, let's see, there was something that just jumped out at me as weird. Yeah, okay, well here, let's just show you. So now I got the cost data for all my properties, and so I can now click the site value tab. And so here's what Spark gives you. And I realize this might look really weird if you haven't seen this before, but let me explain what it is. And hopefully once you know what it is and you're used to it, it won't be complicated at all. But essentially what you're looking at, let's just focus on this one on the left right here, site extraction. We're not going to look at allocation just yet. So this is site extraction. Essentially, and you can see I have property 1 through 6, so these are my comps, and I didn't call them comps because you might include other properties that aren't necessarily in your grid as comps, so we're just calling property 1 through 6. And then also you can see we have average, median, and regression, and this is the average, median, and performing regression on the data from the 6 properties. So immediately you might be like, what in the world is the difference between red dots and blue dots? Which one do I care about? There's just a bunch of garbage on the screen. So let me show you. So first, the slider bar is you deciding what you think the indication of value for your subject site is based on this information. And so I can take this slider bar, move it across, And essentially, I want to line it up with whatever I think is the best point. And so for me, this looks like it. And I'll explain everything in a minute here. But as you can see, if I hover over this, like I'm hitting the average, median, regression, comp 1, comp 2, not comp 3, but comp 4, and not 5 or 6. But I'm kind of going right through the majority of my properties, and especially comps 1 and 2, which I already told you at the beginning are the properties that are most similar in site size to my subject. So those are the ones I probably care about most. So, okay, so first thing you are going to care about is blue dots versus red dots, and it's an important distinction. So blue dots, just if I can talk about an analogy, if you're thinking about your sales comparison approach and you've got your grid, you're just looking at comps 1 through 3, page 2 of your regular 1004, the blue dot would essentially represent the sale price of your comps, and the red dot would represent the very bottom of your grid, the adjusted value of your comps. So I typically, unless I've got some weird situation going on, I focus just on the red dots because those are essentially after I've adjusted the data to my subject property. So just like in the sales comparison approach, you make adjustments based on the property and then to make it similar to your subject, and then and then the red dot is your adjusted value, and that's the one at the bottom. So you want to pay most attention to the red dot. And now, so then the question might be, what exactly do you mean adjusting it to my subject when we're talking about the site? And so let me show you here what's going on. So, all right, I'm going to use comp 5 as my example. So I'm going to hover over the blue dot for comp 5, and you can see it says site size is 8684. The site value is 68,043. And just to show you, I'm going to click on cost approach. I'm going to scroll over to comp 5, and you can see site value 68,043. So that's just doing the math, subtracting out all the improvements, and I get to 68,043 as my site value for comp 5. So I'm going to click back on the site value tab here. And so that's this 68,043 that you see up there in blue, right next to where it says site value. And then right below that, it says adjusted site value. And all that means, and the math is right there to show you, but all that means is we took the 68,043, divided it by the size of comp 5 site. So we divided it by 8684 square feet, and then we multiply it by the size of the subject site. So we divided by 8684 and then multiplied by the subject site size, which is right here, 7759. And so that is what got it down to 60,795. So essentially we're saying, okay, all things being equal, if it was the same size as the subject, then it would be right around 60,795. Now, obviously this isn't perfect because as things get bigger, then price per square foot usually goes down, but it's pretty close. And it's better than using nothing where you have these blue numbers, which are way wacky and not adjusted to your subject at all. The Advisory Opinion 37, which is a new one for USPAP 2018, it talks about, in that advisory opinion, it talks about if you are determining a site value that you should consider, it doesn't tell you you have to, but it basically talks about how you should consider using an adjusted method, like and that's basically what Spark is doing, is it's adjusting the site to your subject, or the comparable site to your subject, by just dividing by the size of the comp and then multiplying by the size of the subject. So that's all the red dots are. And so I typically focus on the red dots and try and not focus on the blue dots, which represent the actual, basically, essentially the sale price rather than adjusted to your subject. Okay, so the one thing that's weird to me, though, is comp 3. So comps 5 and 6, I can understand them kind of being off the line a bit because they're bigger than my subject by a larger amount than the others. But comp 3, I think should be in line. And so I know there's something wrong with what I did there. So I can go back to the cost approach, look at comp 3, and I already know the problem I made here. So because I know this property. So in this case, this property, and this is, I'm glad this came up because I should have shown you what price adjustment means here, because it doesn't apply to the subject. You don't have to do this with the subject, because with the subject you're trying to find basically the cost to build, but here with the properties you're finding site value. So sale price makes a big difference, and so in this case that's the problem, is I haven't adjusted the sale price. So I'm going to click where it says price adjustment in blue so you can see what I'm talking about. And so right here, this is basically a way for you to adjust the sale price of the property to account for market condition differences, seller concession differences, terms of sale differences, like if it's an REO and you need to adjust for that, or you know, if this is an old sale and you need to adjust upward because you have an increasing market, or if you need to adjust for concessions. And in this case, I know that the actual sale price of this property was $172, and you can see it sold at $176.2, but the agreed upon price, and I know this from talking to the agent, was $172, but after they agreed on that price, they increased the sale price of the property to account for the buyer needing money for closing costs. So so basically that's this number right here. So I'm going to adjust for that essentially by typing in negative 4,200, and that takes my sale price down to 172, which is what it should be. That's what the price, that's what the actual agreed upon price was before they did that little addendum to the contract. And I understand this is a bone of contention among appraisers. Not everybody agrees on how you handle this, but this is how I do it. And so it's here if you want to do it. You obviously don't have to. But when I go to site value now, after I've done that, you can see comp 3, which was over here, the red dot was way over here, now lines up. It's virtually on this line, or it is barely on my line of where I drug this around. So basically what you do is when you get to this screen, you drag your slider bar over to where you think it should line up, and that essentially is your value from site extraction, or I should say your site value from extraction. And you also can see that we have average, median, and regression. So a lot of times it's handy to have those there so you can see, like, what is the average number? Do I want to line it up with that? I don't typically recommend going with average or median, but they're there in case you want them as like a visual cue. And obviously not every site extraction is going to line up this nice and pretty. This is pretty good because comps 1 through 4 line up really nice. And you would expect, and this is a good way to tell how accurate your method is, if they're lining up nicely like this and your comps that are further away or less similar to your subject diverge like this, then that kind of makes sense. You would expect them to, at least a little bit, because, for example, comp 6 here, you can see it says up in this little window, that site size is 10,639. And what is that like? That's like 40% bigger than my subject. So I would expect that to kind of not be right in line, because a price per square foot of a larger site is typically going to be lower. And so you would expect it to be down here. And so since this kind of lines up like that, it makes me feel confident this method is working well, that I've typed in the information accurately. So I'm falling at 62,000 right here for site extraction. And again, I realize it's not always going to line up nice and pretty like this. So another thing you might want to do is just think about it again like your sales comparison approach. If you have comp 1 and maybe comp 1's way over here, comp 2's way over here, comp 3's in the middle, and so on, they're not lining up nice. Just think about which one you want to place most weight on, just like you do with your sales comparison approach. So if you think comps 1 and 3 are the best indicators of value for your subject site, then you would want to place this line probably in between comps 1 and 3, or however you want to do it. But so that's how you kind of approach this. And so I've got 62,000 from site extraction, and I have the box checked up here. It automatically checks it when you move the slider bar around, but that means that I've considered this method. So when Spark loads in my site value information into my cost approach, it will know to put a comment into the site value section, basically explaining that when I arrived at my opinion of site value, I used the site extraction method. And if I hover over this right here in blue where it says site comment, it'll show you the comment. So you can see what it says right there for the site value comment. And that's just going to go into my cost approach. Or if you don't want it to go into your cost approach, it'll at least go into your work file. Okay, so I'm not done yet though, because I also have allocation. And allocation, like I said, I'm in Phoenix, Maricopa County, and our allocation is not very good here. So the way Spark gets allocation is it uses your assessor allocation. Now, you're never supposed to use your site value from the assessor. You should never just look at whatever your assessor says for site value and use that. That's not a USPAP compliant method of arriving at site value. But what you are allowed to do is you're allowed to use your allocation percentage from your assessor. So unfortunately in Maricopa County, every single residential property that's a single family detached home is 20%. So it's not very accurate, and that's why you can see the blue and red dots are all over the place. So when the red dots are all over the place, that's a really good indicator that this method probably is not going to be very accurate. And I'm just going to show you here. I'm going to go back to cost approach and show you. it's right here is the allocation. So what it does is it takes the land value from your assessor and divides it by the fully improved value from your assessor, and it gets the allocation percentage. And then all it does is it applies that 20% to the adjusted sale price. So 20% times 172, and that's what gets you the allocation number. So when I go back here, that would be, for example, comp 3. That's this one. So that 20% times whatever I just said the sales price was, that's what got me to the 34,383. And that's the site value that you see right above my mouse in blue right there. And then, of course, adjusted, like I already talked about, it's adjusted to your subject site size, and that's the red dot. So like I said, though, these, for me, are all over the place. So what I'm going to do, at least for allocation, is I'm going to go ahead and consider it, even though it's not super accurate. But since comps 1 and 2 are pretty close in size to my subject property, I'm going to place some weight on them, and I'm just going to call it right in between them, so 46,000. So I got 62 from site extraction, 46 from allocation. I'm going to place very little weight on allocation because it is all over the board. I just don't want to place a lot of weight in that, but I will consider it. And so I'm going to leave that box checked. And now you can see when I hover over this, it does talk about how I considered both methods. And based on extraction, it's 62,000, and based on allocation, it's 46. And then right here, I'm just going to type in what my final opinion of site value. So I'm going to reconcile these two, and I'm just going to call it $60,000. So obviously, I placed almost all weight on site extraction in this case, and I called it $60,000. So that's pretty much it. And I realized I took forever to do that, but hopefully you can see the value there, and that even though site extraction is something that takes a lot of time to do by hand, you can actually, with Spark, as long as you have a fairly good idea of the condition and quality of your comps, or you can at least estimate it fairly well, then you can run this pretty quickly but also pretty accurately. And so now when I scroll over to my subject, you can see, since I typed in 60,000 here for my opinion of site value, it put it right here, and now I have my total number, which is the 194,739. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me think if there's anything else I want to focus on. And again, please, you guys have been very quiet. So feel free to chime in, ask questions. I realize I kind of botched it when I got this bug here. And yeah, and it's still there. I can't get it to go away. I apologize for that. I got to look into that. So yeah, that's it. So now I can export this, load it all into my report. In fact, I'll go ahead and do that just to show you what it's going to look like in a report. Let's go ahead and export that. And yeah, I'll go ahead and load in a grid since I'm just going to load into a brand new report. Again, just make sure if you're doing the cost approach after you've already loaded in your grid into your report from Spark, just make sure and check that box so it doesn't load in comp information over comp information. All right, so let's go ahead and load this up. All right, I'm just going to create a new report with it. And I was thinking about, sorry, just while that's loading in total, it's going a bit slower today. I was thinking when we do our adjustment tool, because we are going to be building an adjustment tool once we're done with some integration. We were planning on already having started that, but we ended up that we're integrating with some other form fillers. So we're going to do that first. But once we do our adjustment tool, I was thinking about doing something like this for your adjustments. So, you know, you have your comps 1 through 6, and, you know, you can kind of use something like this, or even you have your grid, your sales grid, and it plots out your sales, the adjusted price of your comps, and you can kind of just line this up. I'm not sure. I don't know if that's valuable or not, but anyways, this is loaded up. So let me show you what it looks like in your report. All right, cost approach. So this is essentially what it loads in. So I've got my comment because I did use Spark to help me with site value. So it loaded that in, and I've got the 60 grand there. All the other information filled out, the information about my local multiplier, what quality I selected, and what that quality level means. So this basically explains what quality level 3.5 means in layman's terms. And that's pretty much it. And well, one other thing you might care about is the work file. So on work file, it loads in the cost data report, and you may have already seen this, but this is just the cost information for your subject. So there's quite a bit in here. this is basically exactly what it loads into your report. That's just basically a copy of what it loads into your report. So if you ever want to see exactly what Spark did versus maybe if you go in and change things later on, you can come to this page and see exactly what Spark put in. And then here we have the cost estimate details. So this over on the, sorry, I lost my mouse there. Over on the left here, this section is what you typed into Spark for your subject property. And then over here on the right is the data from dwelling cost. Based on what you typed in, this is what it came up with. And then your depreciation information down here, whatever you typed in for that. And it will include functional and external if you have functional external. I didn't type any in, so it's not there. And then on the next page down, it's basically a description of the quality ratings. And again, in layman's terms, what each of those quality ratings means. And the same for patio, porch, deck, and pool information right here regarding the different quality ratings that you have for those. And then for the site value is actually where we have a lot. So first thing it does is subject site value. It tells you what you chose as the final opinion of site value, your subject site size, what that price per square foot or price per acre is. And you can change that in Spark whether you want per square foot or per acre. The comment, here's that little widget that shows you from site extraction and where you placed your slider bar, right? And that's right on the 62,000 mark. And then it gives you the actual math breakdown here. So you can see the actual regression information. For the regression is just this one dot right here, but it's there in case you want it. It's got the equation and everything. And then it explains how all the numbers were calculated in case you're not sure or in case you need to defend yourself later on. But it gives you the site value and then the adjusted site value for each of the properties. And this is just the basic summary of the information. Another page later is the actual breakdown of costs for every single one of the comps in case you ever had to defend yourself on that as well. And then here we got the allocation one where I chose for my slider to be at the, I think that was the $46,000 mark, and then the breakdown of that information. So you can see the allocation, like I said in my area, it's basically always 20%, give or take some rounding there. And what the adjusted and unadjusted values are. And then here, starting on page 2, is where you get into the actual property cost estimate details. So comp 1, the entire cost approach and all the information for comp 1, including depreciation. Then comp 2, all the cost estimate details and everything and depreciation, and so on and so forth. Same thing for all 6 comps. And then last, it's again just another breakdown of each of the quality ratings that are possible for both the dwelling itself up here and the porch, patio, deck, and pool information. That's right there. So let me, hang on. That's pretty much everything. I think I covered it all. Feel free to, if you want to leave now, leave now. You've probably done everything you've probably seen everything you need to, but what I'm going to do is just one more time, go through it quickly, just so you can hopefully get a better feel in case you're still not clear about anything. And again, oh, wait. So somebody asked, sorry, so here we got 2 questions. Can we add all cost and site data as new 2055 report? Yes, you absolutely can. You can do that into a 2055. You can basically do it into any SFR report. Obviously, if you're doing a condo, you're not going to get any cost data, but you should be able to do it into any, actually that's not true. I misspoke. 1004C, so manufactured homes, you do not want to use our cost data for manufactured homes yet. It is something that we're going to be adding. We're basically just waiting on dwelling costs to make it available to us, but we are going to be adding in cost data for both manufactured homes and multifamily actually, but multifamily I'm assuming is going to be much later this year. They've told us that manufactured home is coming up very soon. I would assume sometime this summer, and then multifamily I'm guessing toward the end of this year. So yeah, and then what was your last question? Do you add this to your completed report? To completed report. I'm not sure what you mean by to my completed report, but yes, I do include all that information that, is that report still up? So I leave all this in here, if that's what you mean. I include all this in my completed report. I don't really change any of this unless there's something significant I need to talk about regarding site value or something, or why I place more weight on, or that I place more weight on extraction. I mean, you'd want to talk about that, but otherwise I do leave this pretty much in here how it is. And regarding the work file though, if this is what you're referring to, I do not include any of this information in my actual report unless somebody comes back to me and says they need it for some reason. So if you need to, you can always add it into your report. I don't recommend it unless you have a really good reason, because I've found, at least in my experience and talking to appraisers on a daily basis, usually when you include a lot more information like this, it can tend to bring up a lot more questions. And so I wouldn't include it unless you really need to or you have a really good reason to. Hopefully I answered your question. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do this part one more time just to kind of show you one last time. And again, feel free to take off if you guys need to go. I'm not going to be telling you anything new right now. I'm just going to, in fact, I'll do a 2055 since somebody asked about that. So I'll do a 2055 and then add comparables. And again, I want to do this because I don't want to have to manually type in all those comps for the site value information. This makes it much quicker. Okay. And hang on, I'm going to show you something here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all this information and delete it. So now this is deleted. And what I'm going to do is just merge this, all the cost data into here. And I already have comps in here just so you can see how to load cost data into a report that already has comps so you don't override or mess with your comps. All right, so let's get my subject over here and go to cost data. And again, a lot of people aren't aware of this, but you can do Spark in any, how should I say it? You can do any side of Spark at any time. So if you just want to do cost data, just do it. If you just want to do 1004MC, you can just do it. So in fact, I could come in here and I'm just going to go to Spark. So as soon as I enter my effective date, I can immediately switch. So I don't have to do the grid at all. I can just click 1004MC, do my MC or market analysis if I want to, or I can just go straight to the cost approach, whatever I want to do. You're not stuck into one particular method over another. Okay, so let's go to cost. Whoops, did I get the grid? Yeah, I did. So we're going to do cost data, and I am going to load in my subject, and I'm going to go ahead and load up my comps. I do not have vacant land sales. Just to show you what it looks like though, here, let's just go ahead and do as if we had vacant land sales. I'm going to choose yes. So basically, here's what you do is you type in some kind of identifier. This can be whatever you want, the address, the parcel number, like just the letter A, whatever you want here, and then a sale price if you want to adjust the sale price for some reason, and the site size. And you can also have comments. So in theory, what you could do is something like this. So that's a parcel number, and then I want to have a sale price of, let's just say this lot sold for $115,000, and the site size was 14,844, and I'll say mountain views. Like maybe that has something to do with it. So basically, the reason you want to type that in there is because it will go into your work file. So if you ever had to defend yourself, like maybe why you placed more or less weight on a specific property when you were in here, you'll have that in your work file. It'll say that that property had mountain views, so either it was very similar or not similar to your subject. So that's the way it works. But for now, let's just go, and then you get the same thing, this little widget, and you can select. Obviously, I only loaded in one property, so there's no good information here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my site value method because I don't want to use vacant land sales. Are you sure you want to continue? I do not have vacant land sales. Site extraction. Okay, so now we're going to start up with site extraction. So all I do is load in my comps, and again, I'm going to choose them in the same order as before in how similar they are to my subject site. And I know my subject is 3.5 quality, and I'm just going to push that across. And I know I have a covered patio here, so I'm going to say that this is what was I saying? 150 quality D. Got a carport that's 450, and it's a 2.5 quality. And my effective age was 14. I'm just going to go ahead and push that across to all my comps as well. And then, of course, you want to verify the comp information looks pretty good. Maybe comp 3 didn't actually have a 450 square foot carport. Maybe it actually had an attached garage that was 450, so I can do that. Yeah, and then we'll just go across the board, and then you just change your effective age for each of the comps. I think this one we decided was 26, and then comps 4 and 5 were effective age of 6, just because they're in much more updated condition. And then comp 5 was slightly higher quality as well. So you just tweak these as you go through, and then when you're all set, you just hit Get Cost Data. This usually takes around 5 seconds or so, and then you get everything loaded in. And so now I can go to site value, and I've got this here. And so I can go through and play around with this as I want to. So I'm going to do the same thing. We'll call it around 62,000, and I can call this number whatever I want. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the site, basically the site extraction and allocation methods. And I will say, I did mention earlier that in my area, allocation is not super accurate, but I have talked to appraisers where allocation, their assessor actually does a really good job, and allocation is pretty accurate in their area. And the appraiser I'm thinking off the top of my head who said that, he was in Nashville. I don't know if any of you guys are in that area, or maybe you're just in an area where it's good or not. But anyways, in some areas, the assessor does a good job of getting the allocation accurate. And so for that particular appraiser, extraction actually didn't work very well for him, but allocation did. So he placed most of his weight on the allocation over here on the right. And he actually, what he decided to do is not even take the time to fill out the cost approach section. He just did the allocation, and the allocation's really easy. Essentially, all you got to do here is, let's remove all those properties and I'll show you. So if you just want to do allocation, then, and you don't want to focus on extraction too much, then you can add your comps in. So I'm just going to show you one more time. Right here. Oops, I'm all over the place. Anyways, doesn't matter what order we do these in right now. We're just a little demo. Okay, so I'm going to import those, and then when I go to site value, I've got it. It's already right here. So I don't have to even worry about filling all this in if I don't want to. I've just got my allocation already filled in from the assessor, and I'm good to go. So I can just click on site value. I don't have to take the time to fill out the effective age and the quality and make sure everything is accurate for my comps. I just go off the assessor, it's already filled in, and I can just use this slider, say I want to call it 46, and I'm done. So that's pretty much it. Okay. All right, I think that's it. I know I took up basically exactly an hour. I know, and I went really long. I apologize. Thanks you guys for taking the time to watch this. And feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email anytime with questions. And yeah, we're going to do another class probably in about 2 months. I'm not sure yet what we're going to do it on, but thanks again for attending. You guys have a good one. Wait, sorry, if you're still there, Laura, hang on. I see your question. I don't seem to get option to add comps from grid. My only option is manual. What went wrong? Okay, so good question, Laura. I see it looks like you're still there, so hopefully you can hear me. But the reason you don't have that option is because you haven't loaded comps into your grid in Spark. So what I mean by that is right here on grid, you have to have comps in here. If you don't, then Spark can't bring them over. So that's basically what I meant there is you got to have comps here in order for anything to be loaded across to your cost data. Anyways, hopefully that made sense. All right, thanks again.